welcome to today's SRP education event, Anticipating the Unexpected. My name is Sarah Krapek, and I'm the Director of Participant Experience for Strategic Retirement Partners. And we appreciate you joining us for this first event in our 2023 education series. A few quick notes before we get started today. As usual, all the lines are muted, but we do welcome your questions. If you have one, please get out your phone and fire on the QR code that you see on the bottom of the presentation slides today. That will take you to an online form where you may submit a question. I'll monitor those throughout our session, and we'll get to as many as possible during our time together today. Today's event is being recorded, and the recording will be sent via link to all who registered later this week. And with that said, I am pleased to introduce our presenter for today, Karen Drancik. Karen is a business development advisor with the Neuberger Berman Advisor Institute. She has over 30 years of industry experience and spent the first half of her career working for a corporate fiduciary dealing with the exact topic that we're about to dive into. Karen, on behalf of SRP, we want to thank you and thank the team at Neuberger Berman for your support today. And I am going to turn the virtual floor over to you.
Terrific. Thank you, Sarah. Welcome, everybody. As the title reads, it says, Anticipating the Unexpected, Involving Your Family in Financial Planning and Decision-Making. We all realize that there are things that can kind of hit us out of the blue, but having a loved one become ill or pass away, or just having some major disruption in your family life where someone else might have to come and take care of things for a while, can leave us feeling very vulnerable and leave other family members feeling very vulnerable. So what we're going to be talking about today is a way for all of you to plan and have what I like to call a go file. So that if anything were to happen to anyone, you would actually be able to run and physically pick something up with as much information that you would probably need to make a good decision at that time, depending on what's going on in the family. Oh, hang on just a second. My mouse is a little temperamental. Forgive me for a second. The first thing that we're going to talk about is some family dynamics and some longevity statistics that I want to bring up to kind of get a lay of the land here. Then we're going to talk about knowing what you have. Then we're going to talk about a way to update and address some major life events that might be on the horizon, and then talking about how to create that circle of professionals that your family can come to rely on. Okay, so here's some fun statistics, maybe if you happen to be female, but for the men, this might be a little bit eye-popping. It's probably fairly well known that women, especially in this country, live longer than men. The CDC is actually publishing these statistics on a regular basis. And right now, a woman in this country can expect to live into her mid-80s, 85, 86. Men are just tiptoeing over that 80-year mark. So women are living a good 5 to 6 years longer than their husbands if they're married. On average, women live 22 years beyond retiring if they retire at age 65. And here's the big thing for the men. 70% of baby boomer women, and I am one of these, will outlive their husband. And they'll probably outlive them by a significant margin. Women are more likely to be single in their golden years. The average age of being widowed in this country is an eye-popping 59 years old. When I first did research on this about 15 or 16 years ago, the number was 57. So it's creeping up a little bit, but to me, that's incredibly young. And then you have something called gray divorces. 1 in 4 divorces among couples over the age of 50. That just means that, nobody is protected for forever. And that 8 out of 10 women in this country will be solely responsible for their theirs or their family's finances at some point in time, yet only 1 in 3 women will claim responsibility for managing the household finances. That's a major, major disconnect. Now, you'll notice this is mostly referring to baby boomer women. I do believe that the younger generations are proving this old adage pretty wrong. More and more women are claiming responsibility. But the reason that I'm bringing all these things up is if you happen to live in a household where there's any division of responsibility for managing the family's finances, it's going to be incredibly important to communicate everything about the management of those finances to your partner, to the other person who lives in the house with you, to another member of your family, so that in the event that something does happen to you, someone will be able to seamlessly step into your shoes. All right, so we're going to give you a tool to help you with that. What you see on the screen is a booklet. It's about 8 pages, and it does come in a PDF file, so you will be getting one of these after the event. And this is called Anticipating the Unexpected. It's not a fill in the blank, but it's more of a checklist, if you will, that you can use to conduct a family meeting, to conduct a meeting with your significant other, to have a meeting with whomever you might have had designated as your executor. It's a way to create that go file that I was talking about. My sister's husband lost his mother earlier in 2022, and she'd had a bad heart condition. She knew she was probably going to die from a heart attack very unexpectedly. So she had put together something similar to this and got her son and her daughter down to visit her, and they went through this, and she made them practice on who they were going to have to call and the things that they were going to have to do right away after she died. And she was the one that gave it the name Go File. So I'm hoping that we can take that and you can use it in a similar capacity. In this Go File, you are going to be gathering information, mostly documentation around who are the people that are going to need to be contacted first. Believe it or not, one of the first phone calls that you're going to need to make is probably to a financial advisor, because they're usually the ones who have the keys to life insurance that in most cases will pay for the funeral. So advisor first, estate planning attorney, if there is one, to get a hold of wills and other legal documentation. An accountant, if there is one, will need to be notified. And if people have separate insurance agents, which is what my family did when I was growing up, they will also need to be notified. And then you get heavy into the paperwork. These are the documents and records that don't wait until you think somebody's going to need it. These are the things that I would encourage you to gather right now. And put in this booklet or make notations on where those documents are to be found in your household. I'm talking about things like your estate planning documents, wills, trusts, powers of attorney, advanced medical directives, healthcare power of attorney, titles and deeds to property. So if you own your home outright, the title and deed to your home. Also titles to things like motorized vehicles. Cars, boats, motorcycles, RVs, ATVs, jet skis, snowmobiles. We actually just had to do a title hunt for a couple of snowmobiles that my husband's getting ready to sell. Also make notice of where previous year's tax returns are stored. I'm in the middle of settling my mother's estate. I'm executor. I lost her 2 years ago. And one of the things that I ran across very early on in my duties as executor, one of the things I found out was that my mother hadn't paid her taxes for the year before she passed away. So I had to step in, find out, where did she keep all her previous year's tax returns to get an idea of what I needed to be filling in. And it was very helpful when I found them. Also things like birth certificate for you, your spouse, and your children, your marriage license. Definitely want to find that and stick it in a file. If you've been divorced, divorce decrees. And if you have been divorced, I like to tell the divorcees, don't ever fold, spindle, shred, or mutilate your original divorce decree, because you will need it every single time you go to refinance anything. Military discharge papers. This one came back to haunt me as well. My father passed away 12 years ago. We ended up putting my father in a military cemetery, and one of the things they required were my father's military discharge papers. And it was a treasure hunt trying to find them. So if you are former military, please make sure that you grab those and put them in a safe place so people can find them very easily. Then things related to your finances, bank statements. If you get them in paper, where are they physically located? And if you get them electronically, this may require a username and a password for people to get into those accounts to get those bank statements off, along with any investment accounts and investment statements. It could be something held at a firm. It could also be your 401k plan at your work. How do people get into those accounts to get the information? And lastly, I happen to mention usernames and passwords for accounts, but also people are going to need the usernames and passwords to open every single electronic device that you own. So your smartphone, your tablet, your desktop computer, a laptop computer. We keep a lot of the information that I just listed stored in those devices. You want to make sure people have a way to get into the devices to get them out. Okay, this information will need to be updated depending on how old you are, at least, semi-annually, maybe every year. And you're not necessarily going to update the balances for those accounts in your Go file. All you're going to be doing is updating the numbers of accounts and where they're located. Specifically things like checking account, savings account, investment accounts, annuities, 401k plans. Oh God, what else am I thinking of here? If you have assets that come with titles and deeds, if you've recently paid something off and you happen to get a new title and deed, that will go in here. Your liabilities or your debts. The easiest way to provide this is to put in a copy of your annual credit report. By law, you are entitled to a free copy of your credit report once a year. I would take that and stick that in this file as well. Also, your insurance information. The amount of money that goes unclaimed in life insurance proceeds in this country is significant, like to the tune of $1 billion. And that's because oftentimes beneficiaries don't know that someone had a life insurance policy. So make sure that your loved ones know that you have a policy or multiple policies. Where are the contracts? And when was the last time the beneficiary information on those contracts has been updated? So check the beneficiaries on a regular basis. And then your legal documentation doesn't need to be reviewed as often. I have had multiple conversations with estate planning attorneys over the years, and they generally recommend that you review your will, especially once every 3 years or once every 5 years, again, depending on how old you are. So once you create this file, it's not finished. You are going to have to review it and update it periodically as time goes by. All right. Now, this is understanding what you have in terms of the things that go into your estate plans. And I've already mentioned the majority of these things. In terms of your assets, stocks, bonds, cash, real estate, annuities, qualified plans, your IRA, your 401k plan, or any other type of qualified plan that you might have. And if you are lucky enough, any pensions that you might have. My husband and I do a review of our retirement savings once a year. He brings all of his paperwork from the plans that he had. I bring all my stuff to the table, and every year without fail, when I go over my pension information, my husband is surprised because he forgets that I have two pension plans. One of them is pretty significant and the other one is just very small, but he's like, oh my God, that's found money. I always forget that we have that. So don't forget the pension stuff if you were lucky enough to get one. And then your debts. Standard things here are if you owe money on your house or houses. If you have any personal loans outstanding, usually these are things like car loans, bank lines of credit. My husband and I have a line of credit just as an overdraft protection thing. I forget about it all the time, but he doesn't. And then any credit card debt that you might have. Just update this on a regular basis. I will also put in here, it's not on this slide, but here's something that I did with my mother that I think is also a really good idea to do with your spouse. If you happen to be married or a significant other or another family member, so that in the event that anything were to happen to you, they would be able to step in and continue to pay your household expenses for as long as necessary. Before my mother passed away, 3 months before my mother passed away, we found out that she had brain cancer. And in the process of finding that out, we also found out that she hadn't been keeping up with some of her financial obligations. And my mother literally was the person that would balance her checking account to the penny. So it was highly unusual. And fortunately for me, in trying to clean all that up, my mother and I had done a family love letter for her after my dad died. So in the process of doing this thing, we created a budget where we listed out all of her monthly expenses, and then specifically how did she make the payments. So as her agent first, and then as her executor, I was actually able to step in, pay all of those things to keep the house either up and taking care of her or just keep it up and running until we could sell it. So having that information kind of like on a monthly budget thing where you're also putting in how you make the payments for those things is an incredibly powerful thing to have. And it will give the other person in your household some peace of mind that if anything happens to you, they can step in and do it very easily. Insurance information. We already talked about life insurance, but the other insurance information that I think was incredibly helpful for me when we found out my mother was sick was immediately I had all of her health insurance information. Her insurance and her Medicare information was front and center. She had a little file. I pulled it out. I knew exactly what I needed. I got a little surprise on her life insurance, though. I thought that we'd already cashed out all of her life insurance, and I got a very pleasant surprise when I started reviewing her checking account. I noticed a debit every January going to Protective Life Insurance. So I picked up the phone, I called the company, and they're like, oh yeah, she had a small policy here. And sure enough, I mean, it was, $35,000, which kind of was a nice little extra benefit for me and my siblings. If you have disability insurance, please make sure that your spouse knows that you have it. My husband is actually out on long-term disability right now. So I'm dealing with that on a monthly basis. I have everything that I need. And then long-term care. If you are lucky enough to have long-term care insurance, please make sure that your loved ones know that you have it and where the contract is located in your house so that if that time comes, they'll know where to go to get it and plan for it. All right, legal documentation. This is the other stuff that if you don't have it, I'm highly encouraging you to go get it. Over half of Americans die without a will. And dying without a will is tantamount to telling the state that you live in that it's okay for them to decide where your money and your stuff is going to go. I like to say that if you own $1 and you have people who love you, then you need to have a will. Doesn't matter age, doesn't matter status, just need to have a will. Some people require advanced estate planning and require things like trust, whether they are testamentary in nature or whether they're living trusts. Again, make sure people know not only where to go to find the actual physical documents for your will and your trust, but also understand who the estate planning attorney is that drafted those documents. Powers of attorney, I think, are the most important document that you get in your estate plan. And that's because they are effective while you are still living. Again, if you are a legal adult over the age of 18, you need to have a power of attorney in place so that in the event anything happens to you, somebody will be able to step in legally your shoes and continue to manage your life. I like to tell clients when I was managing money for clients that powers of attorney are the thing that will allow me to talk to your children about your money if anything ever happens to you. Otherwise, I can't talk to anybody about that. So this is what will allow your loved ones to talk to your financial advisor about your accounts. And if you don't have it, they can't say anything. Other legal documents, make notations, prenuptial agreements, postnuptial agreements, divorce decrees, any business documentation if you happen to own a business, articles of incorporation, etc. Make sure that these are in a file so that people can grab them in a hurry. All right. Now, here's one other thing that you're going to be getting a copy of. This is called a surviving spouse checklist, and it is a bit of a misnomer because this is going to be something that you can give to the person that you name the executor to your estate. And while we're on that subject, people often ask me, who should I name as my executor for my estate? Standard practice, first and foremost, is if you're married, you usually name your spouse to be your executor. It's usually at the death of the second spouse that it becomes necessary for a real executor to get in and do the work to settle it. Family members tend to be the most chosen. It's not necessarily the best idea. Sometimes a neutral third party, meaning a family friend, is a good idea. There are things called corporate fiduciaries, corporate executors that are out there that you can hire to do the executorship after you pass away. I just say if you're going to hire a singular person, make sure that they are financially savvy, that they have good time management skills, and that they have good interpersonal communication skills, because they're going to have to be working with multiple family members, and sometimes those family members are not happy. So it's helpful if they can manage personal relationships well. Okay, so this document is going to tell that executor what are the duties that they are going to have to perform as the executor. When are they going to have to do them? So this is laid out on a timeline, and then it's going to mention what are all the documentation and records that they're going to need to get those duties completed. I am using this in the middle of settling my mother's estate right now, and it has been invaluable. It literally will step you through from the first week after somebody dies. And believe it or not, the first document that you're going to need to get is the death certificate for the deceased and their Social Security information, because the funeral homes will require that right away. So I always put those first and foremost on top of the stack when you're gathering the documents. It's the other things that you're going to need to get in a hurry that first week are birth certificates for all of the children that will, or excuse me, beneficiaries that will inherit from the estate. And then the other thing is the life insurance policy. Usually that's a matter of days before the financial advisor will send off to get the insurance proceeds. If you have a safe deposit box, This is one of the things that I often saw working in a bank is kids would show up to the bank saying, I think my mom and dad had a box here. The bank's not going to tell you anything. You need to be aware of where the box is located. Where are the keys, if that's the case? And lastly, how is the box titled so that you can make sure that somebody can actually get into the bank, into the box to get the information out. This goes through 2 to 4 weeks, notifying employers, publishing a notice to creditors so that the executor will know how many debts are out there that need to be settled before the money can be distributed to the heirs. Watching the mail, this was a big one for me. I couldn't watch the mail. My mother lived in Tennessee. I live in Illinois, so I just had all of her mail forwarded to me. There will be multiple meetings with financial advisors. Inventory of household items can be, especially for people that tend to hoard or have lots of stuff. You're going to be doing a lot of cleaning up. And then starting to gather the paperwork. If you have to go through probate, getting everything organized for the final probate hearing, and then having that last family meeting to distribute the proceeds. So this is literally going to walk whoever is that executor to go through that. Now, another thing that you're going to be getting is something called a life events checklist. Here's how I like to describe the life events checklist. And it's something that you'll get, and every time you go to meet your financial advisor, you're going to want to bring this so that you can bring up subject matters that you think need to be discussed while you're there. It's kind of like when you go to the doctor, and when you first walk in, you check in with the receptionist up front. They give you the little clipboard, and you have to sit down and you have to update your medical history. And then one of the things they ask you is, what are you here to see the doctor about today? Well, that's what this is like. But it's broken down into 5 categories of everyday things that happen to people that normally you wouldn't associate with having financial consequences, but they do. So things like getting married, having a baby, becoming a grandparent for the first time. I just found out last week that I'm going to be a grandma for the first time. Divorces, the kids leaving home to go to college. There are significant financial complications and implications for all of these life events that your financial advisor will want to talk to you about. Inheritance is probably pretty self-explanatory. Career events, anytime you get a job, lose a job, start up a business, sell a business, or declare bankruptcy. These are things that your financial advisor will want to talk to you about. Retirement events, not necessarily just the physical act of retiring where you're not working anymore, but some underlying things. Most people, when they get to that age where they retire, are thinking, you know what, we have too much house. So they downsize. Or it's like, ooh, let's go spend 6 months out of the year in Florida, and they buy a condo in Florida. So those definitely have financial implications. And then health and dependency events. Maybe not necessarily your health or dependency. It might be a parent moving back in, or in this day and age, sometimes those college kids that left come back and live with you. Those have financial implications. And then things like disability or chronic illnesses or special needs children, those definitely have highly specialized financial implications that you'll want to talk with a financial advisor about. And you can make a notation on this form every time you go to see your advisor. Now, lastly, I'm going to leave you with understanding who the people are that your loved ones are going to be working with after you're gone. Like I mentioned on multiple occasions, the financial advisor tends to be the quarterback of this circle of advisors because almost everything revolves around money. Making sure that your loved ones are comfortable with your financial advisor is highly recommended. My mother did a very nice job, 10 years ago, getting me in front of her financial advisor. I was her power of attorney, so the advisor could talk to me as well. But I was very comfortable. After my mom passed away, he was one of the first phone calls that I made to get everything underway. If you have a tax professional, and I'm just going to give a plug here for accountants. Accountants are not just tax preparers. These are people that can become very valuable advisors in helping families to maximize their money in terms of not paying as many taxes as possible. Some people, have CPAs that have been on retainer for many years. Some people, especially if there are two breadwinners in the household and you have complicated tax situations, having that accountant on your team, especially around this time of year, can be very valuable. And then the estate planning attorney in general will be another really big point of contact for your loved ones to be working with after you're gone. But that attorney should be somebody that you feel like you should pick up the phone and call at least every 4 or 5 years to say, hey, has anything happened, on the estate planning legal horizon that I need to be aware of? Is it going to affect my current documents? Am I going to need to update anything? And if you don't have one, I would highly encourage you to reach out to any one of your other advisors in your circle for a referral. I will give you a piece of advice as well. If you have an estate planning attorney now that had gray hair when you first started using them, just make sure you keep in touch, because if they retire, it's likely that they will sell their will file and you might end up with a new attorney and not even know it. All right, other key professionals that I mentioned: banker. I'm talking specifically personal banker. My mother had that one person in the bank branch that she walked into and saw on a regular basis. Divorce attorney, not that I'm highly recommending that everyone have one on retainer, but if you have been divorced, just make sure that everybody knows who you went to. Again, and that insurance specialist. Some people have careers and professions that require a protective type of an insurance specialist. I'm specifically thinking about doctors and lawyers, where they're wanting to make sure that they protect not only their careers, but protect their families on top of that. So just make sure that you know who these people are and that your family members know who they are as well. This is a lot of information. You'll see when you get the booklet that it's going to walk you through this. I think the end goal when you get through the process of gathering the information is to sit down and have that family meeting. Doesn't necessarily have to be long, and you may not have to get into the details, but just let your family know that you have gone through this process, you've gathered a lot of the information, and that when the time comes, that you have it located in a specific place. And I highly recommend that that place be under lock and key. So in a safe, in a lockbox, or a filing cabinet that maybe is fireproof and floodproof, depending on where you live, that also comes with a key. So I'm going to stop and turn it back over to you, Sarah, and see if we have any questions that I can help people with.
Yes, Karen, thank you so much for this valuable information. I can tell you that I was personally jotting notes for my own situation. My mother-in-law was hospitalized last week with an unexpected condition. And so that leaves us kids kind of scrambling and trying to get a lot of this stuff in order. So this really couldn't have been more timely for me personally. So I appreciate it. We do have some questions that came through, and we invite you all to submit a question for Karen if you have one. Again, fire on this QR code, submit it, and then it comes right to my computer. Karen, I'm going to ask you to advance the slide one more, because I want to let people know that there are some valuable resources that Karen mentioned in the presentation today. The 8-page booklet, Anticipating the Unexpected, the Surviving Spouse Checklist, and the Life Events Checklist. So Those will all be emailed out to all of you who registered as a follow-up to today's session. But if you want to get started and click on this QR code, it will take you to the Anticipating the Unexpected booklet that you can use as a worksheet in your own family meetings. So to get to some of the questions that came through, Karen, one was, can the Go file be digital? Would you recommend that?
You can. I'm going to give you an answer in two ways. I think from an updating perspective, having a digital version can be helpful because you're not going to have to go in and reinvent the wheel or use an eraser or whiteout or whatever you use these days to make changes. So from that perspective, it's great. The only problem is that technology changes on a regular basis. So if you're saving it today, you're probably saving it to a thumb drive. It might be saved on something else in the future. And the other thing is that people will need to know a username and a password to whatever device you're having it stored on. So that's one of the things. I highly recommend doing things in writing as well. Number one, the technology is never going to go dead. Number two, one of the things that is most comforting about getting this information, especially if it's handwritten, is that it will be written in your handwriting. And that becomes doubly powerful. It's almost like you're communicating twice, and it becomes a little bit more emotional. So don't underestimate the power of putting pen to paper and doing that as well. So I'm kind of hedging my bet here. They are both equally good, but I like to say have a handwritten copy as a backup to the digital anyway.
Okay, great. You had mentioned that, and I love the simplicity of this, if you are a legal adult, then you need a power of attorney. And a question came in, how does one obtain a power of attorney?
Okay, you will need to visit an attorney, preferably an estate planning attorney. The good news is, out of all the legal documents that you will get from an estate planning attorney, this is the least expensive, probably a couple $100. It's a pretty boilerplate type of a document. It does not need to be refreshed on a well, let's put it this way. Most attorneys say that you should probably refresh them every 7 years. Most financial institutions will require you to fill out their own power of attorney document. So it's good to have the one that you get from the estate planning attorney, but for your financial accounts, if they require their own, I highly encourage you to do those as well, because it'll make your loved ones and your agent's life that much easier without having to fight the bank over which power of attorney is most appropriate. So just do the one that they ask, but have one, that's on your own for other things other than finances as well. I'll give you an example here. When my brother was in college, and he started when he was 17 years old, so he was not a legal adult yet, he had an accident in his fraternity house and severed a main artery in his arm. He ended up in the emergency room at the college hospital, and the doctor looked at him, and my brother was kind of out of it, and they needed to do surgery. And he's like, well, have you given anybody your power of attorney? And my brother said, well, I'm not 18 years old yet. And so the doctor's like, okay, good. I can talk to your parents. But if my brother had been over the age of 18, my brother would have had to have been like physically with it to say it's okay for you to talk to my mom and dad. So it's a good thing for everybody over the age of 18 to have one of these.
Yep. Yeah, sometimes I think that people see a seminar like this, Anticipating the Unexpected, and think that it's only appropriate for people who are just on the cusp of retirement. But if you are younger, these are things that you need to pay attention to. If we're helping parents, these are things we need to be attending to. This is all good stuff. A question came in, Karen. Does a will need to be signed? The participant had heard some conflicting information about this.
Yeah, and to the best of my knowledge, yes. When you go to see the estate planning attorney and draw up your will, not only do you have to sign, but you have to have your signature witnessed. Mm-hmm. Depending on where you live, probably by two parties. Right. And then the whole thing will be notarized. And anytime you make a change to it, you'll have to go in, you'll have to sign it, and you'll have to have it notarized again. Mm-hmm. Some people, I think where this might be coming from is there is a way to do a will online. So there are things like LegalZoom where you can go in and you can do these things. But most states require that they be signed and the signature be witnessed by two parties. I also put a plug in here too, that anytime you're using those documents off the internet, you essentially get what you pay for. That's literally if you have a fairly straightforward estate and there's, you're not married, you don't have any kids, and it's just pretty easy. But, you're going to get more than just estate planning information when you go to see that attorney. They're going to provide you with some, ideas of what you might be able to do with your estate. So I think it's very worthwhile to bite the bullet and go see a person instead of a website.
Sure. Yeah. And another question came in that was asking at what is the tipping point between simply needing a will and then needing a trust document? And while we cannot issue specific financial advice during this format today, I would say that in speaking with either a financial advisor or that estate attorney, they would be able to give, to point you in the right direction, depending on the complexity of your financial life. Would you agree with that, Karen?
Yes. In generalities, trusts are generally for people who are, number one, trying to avoid probate. And most of the time people want to avoid probate is because of the fees involved with probate or because of the hassle. In most states, it's probably not necessary. The other thing is if you are over a significant level of assets and you would potentially have a huge tax burden come the time of your demise, then there are things that you can do in terms of trust that would minimize that tax burden. The other thing is oftentimes they are used for people who own property outside of the state where they primarily reside. So a house, for instance, would go into a trust to make settlement that much easier. But these are all highly complicated, and you have to have certain situations for them to be necessary. Sure. Most people don't need them.
Okay. So at this time, Karen, I'm going to ask that once again you advance the slide to the next.
There you go.
Perfect. Thank you. And what I want to share with everyone who's been gracious enough to stick with us today and hear this valuable presentation is that SRP as a reliable resource for you in helping you with your workplace retirement savings plan, hopefully saving in a 401k or a 403b towards your retirement. But as we heard Karen say, there is a lot of value in partnering with a financial advisor at some point throughout your career to not only deal with investments, but the planning, the documentation, and the coordination of your financial life that goes beyond just your 401k. And if today's session has raised questions that you would like answers, or you just want some more information about what a financial advisor relationship could look like, we certainly can help you at SRP. We have a division of our organization called Wealth that helps individuals, couples, and families with financial planning and investment management. If that is of interest to you and you want a free consultation, you can fire on the QR code that you see here, and a member of our team will be in touch to schedule some time with you and your spouse or partner, if you wish, to really take these conversations to the next level and make sure, as Karen mentioned, that you have that financial quarterback who has your best interests in mind and can help you through good times and in some cases bad times as well. So with all that to say, again, Karen, I want to thank you for spending time with the SRP community today. We appreciate you sharing your experience and your personal anecdotes as well, which kind of sheds a unique light on all of this for us. And as far as all of our guests, please stay tuned for our next webinar, which will be on May 16th. And invitations will be coming out at the beginning of May for that session, where we're going to be talking about tips for surviving a potential recession. So thank you again for joining us today. Stay tuned for the recording and the link to those resources that Karen mentioned earlier, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye-bye.